Well, Jim, let's talk about something scary. And of course, a wrestling war is quite a scary thing. And last week here on the show, we talked about a program I had about the start of the Dallas wrestling war. I have one here. Dallas Wrestling, Pappy Showland, where you see wrestlers of proven ability. Tuesday, May 25th, 1954, Dallas, Texas. The headline, Dallas Wrestling War Ends. World's greatest wrestlers to be seen at Sportatorium starting next Tuesday. So we're following up now on a year earlier. Things are really bad. The Sportatorium is burned down.
Well, I was about to say it had been going on for a year. The Houston group trying to get into Dallas, into that market. Their first live television broadcast, the feed had mysteriously gone out, and then through some happenstance, the actual world-famous Sportatorium on the corner of Katie's and Industrial in Dallas caught fire and half of it burned down. And over that period of time, they had switched buildings, went out to the fairgrounds, and now I understand that they had renovated the Sportatorium by that point, the showplace of the South, and it was ready for action, and they settled the war. What does that program tell you? What facts have we unearthed from this war of 70 years ago and how it was solved?
Several interesting things. Let's go first to the Sportatorium, because that's one of the big stories here on the front page. Beautiful new building to see stars. The Sportatorium, the most beautiful sports arena in the Southwest, and one of the newest buildings of its kind in the country, will be the scene of the country's best wrestling action next Tuesday night and every Tuesday night thereafter. With the end of what most people called a wrestling war, plans were laid for all Dallas wrestling to come under one banner and under one roof, and with the successful completion of negotiations, next Tuesday night, June 1st, was decided upon as the great day. The news will be welcomed by Dallas Mat fans, who will benefit greatly from the merger. The new Sportatorium has a seating capacity of 5,500, with every seat affording a magnificent view of the ring. Excellent parking facilities surround the building, making it easy to get into either wet weather or dry. I'll stop there for a second.
I'm just going to tell you that I don't know what the excellent parking facilities looked like in 1954, but in 1985, it was a giant gravel lot with weeds. And there was no way to paint spaces or paint lines for spaces. So everybody just kind of lined up in the way they remembered doing it last week. And they let the boys park right on the side of the building next to the door to Ken Mantell's and the back offices.
And of course, it's a beautiful new Sportatorium here in 1954. By the time you got there 31 years later, it had seen its better days in terms of at least appearances and building structure and air conditioning and whatever else you want to say. What about the thing here? It says that every seat affording a magnificent view of the ring. Did you ever sit in the seats? I know not while the show was going on. What do you think?
Well, no, because, I mean, we had access to the building. We went in there sometimes to shoot a couple of promos. We went in there sometimes to have, a meeting at the, with the booker. We went in. One time I worked out some stuff with Sunshine. We were doing our angle. And that's one thing that was true. Every seat was fantastic because it was, as we talked about, the seats went straight up. There was a small ringside area, and then the seats on every side, but that left side where that burned down, they just put a wall up. The seats went straight up and around, and so you could see down on everything. And those high shots on camera on the World Class show, that's what it looked like. There was a person everywhere. That says 5,500. Maybe that's possible. I thought by figuring the ticket prices and the gates that were being reported, it was more like 4,000 to 4,500. But then again, when they had control of their own building and their own ticketing, and there was a Texas commission at the time, or at least somebody that they had to pay taxes to, so there may have been a malfunction at the junction when it comes to exactly how many people were in there and how much money they paid. But yeah, I'll tell you, here's what kind of building the Sportatorium was in the 1980s. The guys in the office, Bronco Lubitsch, David Manning, referee Rick Hazard, whoever was going to be in the actual Sportatorium when there wasn't a show going on, there weren't fans or whatever, they were just in there for the offices to have meetings or do a booking meeting, go up in Fritz's office on the second floor, whatever. Some of the guys like David Manning and Rick Hazard would take 22 pistols and go into the arena part of the Sportatorium by the light switch and flip the fucking light on and see if they could pick off some of the rats when they started running when the light hit them. That was a sport that was engaged in on off hours at the Sportatorium. So that's what had happened to the building at that point. It was a great atmosphere for wrestling and for a wrestling crowd, but boy, howdy. Like you said, no air conditioning, and we've talked about the giant rats that I've seen that jumped on me one time, the rat bones they found in the bottom of the deep fryer in the concession stand. And there were holes in the wall, as Mama Cornette used to say, big enough to throw a cat through. So it was quite a production.
And by the early 90s, it looked horrible on TV, just dark and empty. But even like in 84, it's already an old building. The way it's lit, the way it's shot and filled up with people, it looks pretty good.
Yeah. That was the world famous Sportatorium. That was, the syndicated television, because of that jam-packed crowd of somebody filling every seat and how close they were to the ring. The audio picked up of that screaming crowd, and you saw people in every camera shot going berserk over what was going on in the ring, and that helped the show. And then, every once in a while, somebody thought they were going to get involved and save the day, and they got those great clips like when the guy confronted Terry Gordy, and Gordy just reached out and just shoved him so hard his fucking feet went over his head. He turned a complete backflip, landed in the front row, and never spilled his beer. Just shit like that would happen in that building. And it was all under the control of world-class wrestling, the office. There was no independent arena manager. There was the only security was people that world-class hired. The only people working there were people that world-class hired to do the concessions or whatever. So it was completely our own world, and anything could go on in that fucking building.
Well, back to this program here. The game's top stars, men of proven reputation and ability, who have been seen in action here at Pappy's each week, will be seen at the Sportatorium without exception, and plans call for more of the great grapplers of the world to appear at the Industrial Encadas Sports Arena. So make your plans now to attend next Tuesday's Gala Card, a great action-packed bill of bouts that promises to provide fans with something to remember the end of the Dallas wrestling battle. And there's a joint statement here.
And I could almost hear him saying, and all the fans will be left with ecstatic looks on their faces.
A joint statement issued by all concerned. Wrestling wars in Dallas will be confined to those in the ring, and no longer between Ed McLemore of Dallas and Morris Siegel and Frank Burke of Houston, all three of whom were partners until about a year and a half ago in the promotion of wrestling at the Sportatorium. It has been announced by McLemore, Siegel, and Burke that they have formed a corporation which will conduct wrestling bouts at the Sportatorium on Tuesday nights, and it is essentially this combination of men which brought such outstanding wrestling shows to Dallas fans so successfully for 18 years prior to 1952. Here's a quote. Unfortunate misunderstanding caused a severance of many years of friendly association between McLemore and Burke and myself, commented Morris Siegel, and resulted in Ed promoting by himself and Burke and me in association with Norman Clark in a competing promotion. Happily, we have all come to realize that the wrestling fans of Dallas are entitled to the best possible wrestling bouts, which they will get under one roof and under one banner. That's the end of that quote. Norman Clark, who was ordered by his physicians to limit his activities because of a heart condition, will confine his wrestling endeavors.
Wait a minute. A wrestling promoter with a heart?
Will confine his wrestling endeavors to the city of Galveston, where he has promoted wrestling for many years.
We're sending this shit to Stupid Quick down to Galveston. Galveston, oh Galveston. That's where we send the asshole that became Odd Man Out.
And Norman Clark, thanks to fans. Promoter Norman Clark, who's been hospitalized in the John Seeley Hospital for 4 of the past 6 weeks by a heart attack, is on hand tonight and issued the following statement of gratitude to Dallas fans. Part of it is cut off because someone wanted to go for the lucky number that day.
Oh.
That's one of those things you have to live with as a program collector. But what are your thoughts here, Jim, on this program, the end of the Dallas Wrestling War, the end of wrestling at Pappy's Showland?
Well, can you think back on any other wrestling war where it was ever solved so amicably and everybody said such nice things about the other side and they all got back together except for the one guy that probably instigated the whole thing they sent down to Galveston? I get the feeling that, we talked about the promotional war between Sheik and Bruiser in 72 to 74 in Indianapolis, or the one in Atlanta, 72 to 74. A lot of things were going on that time period. Or Nick Goulis's problems with Jerry Jarrett, or, whatever the case may be. A lot of times it led to business being hot in that particular area because each side was trying to bring in the best talent, trying to hot shot and trying to, put on the best shows. And for a while, things would really take off and then somebody eventually would lose. Or sometimes it was just such a mismatch that it never really made a difference. Like ICW and the Poffos against Jarrett, it was more of a nuisance thing. But in this case, from what we've been able to piece together from newspaper accounts and from the old programs, this hurt the business in Dallas on both sides. Don't you agree? The Sportatorium was out of action for a year. Everybody had to change buildings. When you were talking about the last time we read from that previous program, they had some gates listed, and both offices were doing much worse than the single office had done the previous year. And it seemed, and I guess this was so underhanded and so cutthroat of a thing, knocking off television feeds, burning buildings, that they damaged not only the established company's business, they damaged the wrestling business to where that fewer people were going to see either one of the shows, and nobody was making any money out of it. And finally, apparently, they realized whatever had instigated the whole thing, which probably nobody will ever know, what real disagreement went on behind closed doors between these guys that had worked together for a while and who knew came in the picture. They probably finally said, what the fuck? We're running ourselves out of business, and we got to fix this. What does it look like to you? Because there's no major cards or big triumphs or hot shot booking that we can tell that went on. It's just down, 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 gloom, despair, and agony, oh me.
Well, there is some booking we could talk about that went on, because didn't Macklemore start doing stuff with Jack Pfeffer?
Well, I mean, there you go. I mean, it's not like great. There wasn't a big stadium show. There wasn't, oh my God, the world title changed hands. This was Texas wrestling at that point, was in that era, fairly small time, and they were making it smaller.
It's interesting with the Atlanta War. At the end of it, Tom Renesto came out okay. He got hired back by the NWA office to be the booker. Paul Jones obviously stayed, but every other party was kind of in and out. In this one, everyone, other than Norman Clark being hospitalized, everyone ended up back where they were, with the exception of Doc Sarpolis.
That's right. Doc Sarpolis was involved previously. But he had always had a hand in Texas wrestling, especially out in West Texas, and would continue to do so for years, just in different places in Texas.
Well, perhaps if any of the shenanigans went on today, perhaps there'd be a lawsuit.
There might very well be. And that's the question we've got to ask all of the listeners out there today. If somebody has burned down your wrestling arena and you want to get even, if somebody has knocked your live television feed off the air by clipping the cord, cutting the cable, as they say, if somebody has stolen away your entire talent roster, whether it be wrestlers or whether it be just I don't know, your immediate family. Say you're a spurned paramour. Whoever it may be, you want to get even in a court of law, you know the man to call.
Call Stephen P. News. If you need to sue. An outlaw mud show or two. Those are the rest.
And we didn't even plan ahead of time that a question about old Dallas wrestling would be followed by the perpetrated theme of the old world-class television program in syndication. But nevertheless, speaking of old programs, Stephen P. New, he's running an old program. It's called Justice. That's the program he's running. He's going to get even for you. He'll get even with you if you mess around with him, but he'll get even for you if you retain him. The man that, when Stephen P. New takes action, even the entire state of West Virginia trembles. They go into a state of emergency called by Governor Justice. What a name. Because of Stephen P. New's actions in trying to get legal justice for all the poor incarcerated criminals over there that are being mistreated with their substandard jails. But he does the same thing for nice old ladies walking in the park. If you're a nice old lady walking in the park and somebody comes along and runs you down with a vehicle, well, your family can call Stephen P. New and he'll get even for you. Whether you've been wrongfully terminated, whether you've been poisoned or your health has been compromised, whether you've been cheated out of money, whether you've been lied to by a major greedy corporation that has perpetrated negligence upon you, all of these things are fair game for Stephen P. New at newlawoffice.com, 888-692-8084. He and or his minions. He has tentacles everywhere that reach out and grab perpetrators on behalf of the offended and the damaged, and he will do the same thing for you. And as we know, Stephen answers his phone. If he don't, somebody on his behalf will. And if he can't help you, he will tell you where to go to get help. Stephen P. New at newlawoffice.com, 888-692, did we mention 8084, is the number to call. When you need to get even, you need to call Stephen.